Good day, Honors Biology students. Welcome to Video Lecture Episode 7. Today we're continuing in Chapter 11, Section 2. We're picking up on Slide 17. But just a quick reminder from our last lecture, we just had gotten into codominance and we talked about that and showed the visual representation on Slide 16 of the summary of codominance. Well, starting in Slide 17, we're going to talk about an example of codominance, and that is sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease provides a helpful case study in dominant inheritance. The allele which is responsible for sickle cell is most common in people of African descent. About 9% of African Americans have one form of the trait. Now, if you look at slide 18, we're going to define what sickle cell disease is. Sickle cell affects red blood cells by affecting their ability to transport oxygen as it changes their shape, and their size. Now, if you look on slide 18, you'll see the image shows what I mean by that, how it affects both the size and shape. Now, the protein in the hemoglobin changes, which changes the shape of the red blood cell to a sickle or C shape. They don't circulate well due to their shape and block circulation in the bloodstream, which, as you can tell, that's not a good thing. Individuals who are heterozygous for the trait have both normal and sickle-shaped cells. They live relatively normal lives as the normal cells compensate for those cells which are sickle-shaped. All right. Now let's talk about a little bit of a connection with sickle cell disease and a disease called malaria. Now, if you look at the image on slide 21 on the right, we see the distribution of both sickle cell disease and malaria in Africa. There are larger areas where sickle cell disease and malaria overlap, as seen in the illustration there. So if you look at the color on the image, you'll notice that sickle cell disease is represented by that reddish color. Malaria is like a yellow color, and the overlap is like a pinkish orange color. It's kind of hard to tell because the image looks different on the slides. Now, here's a question I'd like to ask you on slide 22. Why do you believe there is such high levels of sickle cell disease in Africa? Think about that. Why would that be the case? Well, let's move a little bit further forward and let's have a discussion about why that is. On slide 23, let's take into consideration this information. Scientists have discovered that people who are heterozygous for the sickle cell trait have a higher resistance to malaria. In fact, those areas where the sickle cell trait is high, they have a lower death rate in relation to malaria. As a result, more people live to pass on the sickle cell disease, and consequently, the number of those with sickle cell increases because they obviously survive as they're resistant to malaria death. Now, let's get into multiple alleles on slide 25. Multiple alleles is just referring to how certain traits are passed on through not just simply one allele, but more than one. Not all traits are controlled by two alleles. Some are controlled by more than two alleles. These are referred to as multiple alleles, and an example of this is human blood group, which we'll be considering as we close out this lecture. Now, looking at slide 26, we're going to see a visualization for the ABO blood groups that is on figure 11.6, but I also have as an image on slide 26 on the right-hand side. They have three forms of the alleles. Now, they are sometimes called AB markers, and we'll talk about what those alleles are that referring to the AB markers. Now, if you look at slide 27, it visualizes this a little bit more, and so you can see what distinguishes someone from having type A, type B, type AB, or type O as far as blood. Let's move on to slide 28. Now, I with a letter A superscripted is blood type A. I with a superscript, of B is blood type B, and lowercase I is blood type O. Type O is the absence of the AB markers. The lowercase I allele is recessive to both I, capital I, with a superscript of A, and I with a superscript of B. I superscript A and I superscript B are dominant. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, you see there's an image of the percentage or the likelihood of being a part of this blood type. If you notice that people in O positive as well as A positive are the most common, with, if you look on the far right-hand side of that image, that B negative and AB negative are the ones that are more on the rare hand side of people having those particular blood types. Now, thus we see human blood groups exist both multiple alleles and codominance. So multiple alleles plays into this as well as codominance. And there is one other factor we need to mention in connection with blood, and that is the Rh factor. Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, an offspring receives an Rh factor from both parents. Rh factors can be positive or negative, so it's either Rh plus or Rh minus. Rh plus or Rh positive is referred to as the dominant one, and as a result, Rh negative is of course the recessive, and it doesn't happen as often. Now, we're going to go ahead and finish today on slide 31, just kind of visualize how this connects with inheritance, but also talks about the reality of how this can be dangerous if a woman is pregnant if the blood types don't match up just take a look at the image. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I do hope this lecture has been helpful, and have a nice day, folks. Take care.